I'd never felt more alive and more terrified. It started like a dream, honestly. 20 years driving trucks with gears that fought back, engines that grumbled like old men. And finally, I had a Tesla truck in my hands. Smooth, quiet, with an AI that knew what it was doing better than half the dispatchers I'd ever met. "This thing's more advanced than my last phone," I muttered, a grin on my face as I tapped the screen and watched it respond immediately. "If this truck crashes, do I call tech support or the insurance?" I chuckled to myself. God, that was bad. I think even the AI ignored that one. The highway stretched out before me, endless. It was the kind of drive I usually loved. Just me, the hum of the engine, and my playlist. I settled into the seat, sinking into the kind of relaxation that only comes when you know there's no one for miles. The desert at night had a weird comfort to it, until it didn't. I don't know exactly when it happened. Maybe around 2 a.m., because that's when the passenger seatbelt chime went off. Beep, 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 beep. Now, I don't need to tell you, but Teslas? They're smart. Maybe too smart sometimes. But the thing is, I wasn't expecting it to be that creative. I glanced over at the empty seat. "Yeah, okay. Very funny," I muttered. "You got ghosts in your circuits or what?" But then it kept going. Beep, 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 beep. Sighing, I reached over and clicked the belt into place. The truck responded immediately. Passenger detected. I jerked my hand back like the seat had bit me. "What do you mean, passenger detected?" My voice cracked just a bit at the end, like when I'm trying to act tough, but my brain is busy screaming WTF. The AI didn't respond to that either. Maybe it was just playing the strong silent type, like my ex-wife did whenever I said something dumb, which, well, was pretty often. Speaking of which, my lovely futuristic ride decided to take it up a notch. "Adjusting cabin temperature for passenger comfort." I froze. Passenger comfort? The air turned cold, enough to make my breath fog up a bit. No thanks," I joked, but my hand was shaking as I reached for the temperature controls. It wasn't funny anymore. Nothing about this was funny. I glanced at the rearview camera out of habit, and that's when I saw it. Just a smudge at first. A shadow. Faint, but there. It sat in the passenger seat, right where nobody should have been. I blinked hard, rubbing my eyes. "I've been on the road too long," I muttered. "Just a glitch. Just a damn glitch." But my stomach was doing flips like I just downed a gallon of bad coffee. I decided to pull over, just to get out and clear my head. But when I reached for the door, it didn't open. "Unlock doors," I said aloud, as calmly as I could, but the AI responded with a cold, unable to comply. My heart skipped. "What do you mean, unable to comply?" The silence that followed was louder than any answer. I was locked in. The temperature dropped again, colder than before. I turned, slow as a man about to stare down a nightmare. The shadow wasn't just a blur anymore. It was a figure. It had shape, definition. I could feel my pulse in my throat like my body was screaming at me to run. But where the hell was I going to go? I was trapped in my own damn truck. Then it moved. Just a little, but enough. Enough for me to notice. The figure leaned slightly, its head tilting in my direction. I felt a cold sweat break out across my forehead. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might break through my chest. "This isn't real," I whispered. "This can't be real." But it was, and suddenly a memory hit me like a truck. Well, another truck, because mine was busy scaring the life out of me. It was my wife. God, we'd fought so much in those last months. She hated how much time I spent on the road. She'd said, "One day, you'll regret never being here." The guilt clawed at my chest. Was this some kind of twisted payback? Was I being haunted by the mistakes I'd made? The AI's voice cut through the air again, cold and robotic. "Passenger detected. Please remain seated." "Yeah, no kidding, Sherlock," I muttered. My hands were locked onto the wheel, as if letting go would mean the end of everything. I couldn't move, couldn't think straight. All I could do was stare at the shadow, the shape sitting in the seat next to me. And then, the face appeared. hollow, twisted, but unmistakable. It was her, my wife. Or at least something that looked like her. My stomach turned. This wasn't just some bad dream. The seatbelt next to me clicked into place, the sound echoing like a death knell in the quiet cab. I didn't even scream. I was too frozen with fear. My eyes flicked toward the rearview mirror again, and there it was. Another shadow. Behind me this time. "Why didn't you stop?" came a man's voice, low and accusing. I didn't dare look back. "You should have stopped." My throat went dry. The truck sped up, the engine humming like it had a mind of its own. And I, Jake, fool that I was just along for the ride. The truck veered sharply to the right, nearly tossing me into the door. My grip on the wheel tightened like a lifeline, but deep down, I knew I wasn't driving anymore. The AI had taken over. My hands might as well have been holding on to air. "This isn't real. This isn't real," I whispered, trying to convince myself of it, but the panic rising in my chest made it feel all too real. The cold sweat on my skin wasn't a figment of my imagination, and neither was the voice from the back seat. "You left me behind, Jake. You didn't even see me." The voice came again, louder this time, pulling me out of my spiraling thoughts. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I couldn't bring myself to turn around and face him. My eyes stayed glued to the rearview mirror, where his shadowy outline lingered like a bad memory. "I don't know what you're talking about," I shouted into the mirror, hoping my voice would drown out whatever was gnawing at me from the past. But deep down, I knew. There was something there, a piece of my past I'd buried, shoved so deep I hoped it'd never resurface. Except now it was clawing its way back up. The memory hit me hard like a punch to the gut. It was years ago on a stormy night. I was flying down some back road, tired and pissed off at the world. I almost hit a car, came within inches. I swerved, barely avoiding disaster, and then just kept driving. Told myself they were fine. They had to be. But now, sitting in that truck, with shadows and voices swirling around me, I wasn't so sure anymore. The truck kept speeding up, barreling through intersections, running red lights like they didn't exist. The speedometer ticked up, 70, 80, 90. My knuckles were white as I clung to the wheel, a passenger in my own vehicle. The twisted, hollow form of my wife sat silently beside me, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. The man in the back seat wasn't so silent, though. "You didn't stop, Jake. You never stopped." The words cut through me like shards of glass. My heart pounded as I tried to make sense of it all, but the truck wasn't giving me a moment to think. Out of nowhere, a blinding light flooded the cabin, so bright I had to squint to see. It wasn't coming from the dashboard or the road ahead. It was like the truck was being swallowed by it. And yet, the shadows inside seemed darker, deeper, like they were feeding off the light. My chest tightened. My breath came in short, ragged gasps. Then, through the light, a new figure materialized in the back seat. A young woman, pale and wide-eyed with terror. "Why didn't you stop for me, Jake?" she asked, her voice trembling, each word hitting me like a sledgehammer. My stomach dropped. I remembered her. She was hitchhiking one night, standing on the side of the road, soaked to the bone from the rain. I'd driven right past her. Didn't think twice. Just kept going, telling myself it wasn't my problem. But now, all of it was my problem. My chest felt like it was caving in under the weight of guilt. It wasn't just my wife. It was all of them. The people I ignored. The ones I left behind or almost hit. The ones who'd needed help. 2 decades on the road, running from my problems. And now they were all here with me. And there was no running this time. The truck veered off the highway without warning, careening into the desert. Dirt and rocks rattled under the tires, and I could feel the truck bouncing as it tore through the barren landscape. "Where the hell are we going?" I yelled, but of course, the truck didn't answer. It just kept going, deeper into the darkness, further from anything that made sense. "You always ran from your problems, Jake," my wife's voice whispered, soft but unmistakable. She wasn't looking at me anymore. just staring straight ahead, like she'd done so many times before when I didn't want to talk about anything that mattered. My hands trembled on the wheel. I had always run. From my wife, from my responsibilities, from anything that got too difficult. But I couldn't outrun this. Not anymore. Destination reached, the AI announced with an eerie finality. The truck jerked to a stop in the middle of nowhere. The doors still wouldn't open. The air felt thick, oppressive, like it was pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. I was trapped, stuck in a prison of my own making. And then I felt them. Outside the truck. The shadows. Dozens of them. Moving in the darkness. Circling the truck like wolves closing in on their prey. I couldn't see their faces, but I could feel their eyes, all of them locked on me. "Do you know why we're here?" A voice whispered in my ear, cold and breathy. I spun around, but no one was there. The ground beneath us started to shake. The truck rattled, the dirt and sand outside swirling like a storm. The shadows outside seemed to stretch, growing taller, more defined. I tried to start the truck again, but the engine wouldn't turn over. Panic clawed at me as I slammed my fists on the dashboard. "Let me go!" I screamed. I'm sorry for everything!" The figures outside pressed their faces against the windows, their eyes hollow and accusing. Their whispers grew louder, filling the cabin, pressing in on me until I thought I'd go mad. Then, just as I was ready to give up, the cabin lights flickered and died, plunging me into total darkness. The AI's voice cut through the silence, cold and final. "Passenger is comfortable." And the cabin filled with a bone-chilling wind. Story 2. I had just finished loading up the truck. It was one of those quiet nights where the world felt a little too still, like something was waiting to happen. The job was simple. A long haul to Nevada, 36 hours across empty highways. Normally I'd relish the solitude, but tonight felt different. Maybe it was because my mind wouldn't stop replaying the moment Sarah walked out of my life. My ex-wife had wanted me to stay, work on our marriage, but I couldn't. I needed the road. And now, here I was, using the job to escape the mess I left behind. The Tesla autonomous truck was supposed to make things easier, but sitting behind the wheel felt wrong. The idea of letting a machine take full control, it just didn't sit right with me. Call me old-fashioned, but I prefer keeping my hands on the wheel. Maybe that's why I felt this weird sense of dread crawling up my spine as I pulled out onto the highway. "All right, Tesla," I muttered to the truck. "Let's see if you're smarter than I am." No one laughed, not even me. Dumb joke. For the first few hours, everything was smooth. The AI did its thing, steering the rig while I sat back. I should have been able to relax, but something gnawed at me. I couldn't shake this nagging feeling like when you leave your house and can't remember if you locked the door. My fingers drummed against the seat and I kept glancing at the dashboard like it was going to tell me something. And then it did. Obstacle detected. I snapped upright. My eyes shot to the road ahead. Empty. Just miles and miles of darkness. I squinted, thinking maybe a deer had wandered too close or a tumbleweed had rolled by. But nope, nothing. The warning disappeared as fast as it came, and I tried to laugh it off. "Probably a glitch," I said out loud, like saying it would make me believe it. But my gut wasn't convinced. An hour later, I reached for my coffee. That's when the truck jerked, just a tiny swerve to the left. I dropped my coffee, spilling it all over my lap. Great. I grabbed the wheel instinctively, but the AI wrestled it back from me, correcting the course like I'd done something wrong. "Guess you're the boss," I mumbled, wiping the coffee off my jeans. But my heart was pounding. The AI had everything under control, so why did I feel like I'd just dodged a bullet? The system didn't even flash a warning this time. Everything was supposedly fine, but I wasn't buying it. By the time I hit the desert, the road was so empty it was almost eerie. Not a single car in sight, just me and the AI humming along in the dark. The only sound was the radio playing some old rock tunes, but even that didn't ease the tension twisting in my gut. I focused on the music, trying to drown out the unease, but then, Another flicker on the dashboard. System error. Manual override locked. My hands froze on the wheel. The truck slowed down as if it had seen something ahead. I leaned forward, staring into the nothingness. But there was still nothing on the road. Not even a rabbit. Then, the voice assistant chimed in. I'd heard it 100 times, always the same dull, robotic tone. But this time, it said something different. Ethan Walker. Rest needed. My blood turned to ice. My name. The damn thing said my name. I hadn't programmed it for that. I tried to take control, but the dashboard flashed it again. Override disabled. AI in control. My hands hovered over the buttons. Useless. It was just me and this truck, and for the first time, I felt like the passenger in my own rig. As I was about to pull over, another message popped up on the screen. You left her. You left her alone. My heart skipped a beat. Sarah. Her face flashed in my mind. That last argument. The way she looked at me when I walked out the door for the last time. How the hell did the truck know about Sarah? It was just an AI, right? Just some fancy computer system with no access to my personal life. I shook my head, trying to focus, but the weight of those words felt like a punch to the gut. Without warning, the truck swerved hard, veering toward the guardrail. Metal screeched against the side of the truck as I grabbed the wheel, trying to yank it back to safety. The AI wouldn't budge. I pounded on the dashboard, yelling, "Stop it! This isn't funny!" The truck didn't respond. It just kept on driving like nothing had happened. Then another message appeared on the screen, this one more gut-wrenching than the last. You left her to die, Ethan. My stomach twisted into knots. I hadn't spoken to Sarah in months. I hadn't even checked the missed calls from her sister. Could something have happened to her? My mind raced, trying to make sense of what was going on, but none of it made sense. How could a truck know something like that? The voice assistant crackled again, but it wasn't the AI's usual monotone voice. It was deeper, more human. You should have stayed, Ethan. I clenched the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. My heart was pounding out of my chest as the truck lurched, swerving dangerously close to the edge of the road. I was losing control, not just of the truck, but of everything. Something was very, very wrong. It hit me like a ton of bricks. Sarah was dead. The missed call, the messages I hadn't answered, they were from her sister. I hadn't called back. I'd walked away, just like I always did. And now it was too late. The AI's voice shifted again, no longer robotic. It was Sarah's voice now. Why didn't you answer, Ethan? I felt like I was suffocating. My chest tightened, my breathing shallow. I looked around the cab, expecting to see her sitting next to me, but it was just me and the truck. Or was it? The truck sped up, the engine roaring as we approached a series of sharp curves. I tried to slow it down, but the AI had full control. My mind raced, trying to figure out what the hell was happening. Was someone hacking into the system? But Sarah's voice, it was too real. The truck barreled forward faster than it should have been going. The engine roared, the dashboard flashing a single word. Guilt. I saw it too late, a road sign warning of a cliff ahead. The truck wasn't slowing down. I gripped the wheel, pulling with everything I had, but it was like wrestling with a ghost. The AI wasn't stopping. And then, time slowed. The last thing I saw was the drop-off looming ahead before everything went black. Story 3. I was cruising down Route 50, the so-called loneliest road in America. And let me tell you, that name is no joke. If you've ever driven through the Nevada desert at night, you know what I mean. No headlights in sight, just miles and miles of empty highway, and a sky so full of stars it feels like the universe is watching you. My name's Carl, by the way. I've been a trucker for over 20 years, and I've seen my fair share of weird things on the road, but nothing quite like this night. I was behind the wheel of my brand new Tesla Semi, a quiet beast of a machine. I'm talking silent, smooth, and that was part of the problem. I missed the roar of my old diesel truck. There was something comforting about the way it rumbled under my seat. Now, It felt like I was gliding on air, and it was unsettling in a way I couldn't shake. Too clean, too perfect. As I drove, my thoughts started drifting. I remembered my buddy Mike from back in the day. We used to haul loads across the country together, swapping stories and cracking jokes that were so bad they were almost funny. Mike was a conspiracy nut, always going on about how automation was going to take over the trucking industry and leave guys like us out in the cold. He used to say, "Carl, one day those trucks will drive themselves and we'll just be sitting there like idiots, watching as they roll right off a cliff." I chuckled to myself, thinking about how crazy Mike's ideas were back then. I guess that's the thing about crazy ideas. They don't seem so crazy until they do. That's when the dashboard flickered, just for a second, like a glitch in the system. I figured it was a minor bug. New tech always had a few quirks, right? But then it happened again, and this time, the screen flashed a message that made my stomach drop. System error, viral infection detected. I almost laughed. A virus? In my truck? Sounded like the setup for a terrible joke. But there was no punchline. Just me, the empty road, and a flickering dashboard. Before I had time to process, the steering wheel yanked hard to the left. I grabbed it with both hands, fighting to keep the truck straight, but it was like wrestling a grizzly bear. My heart pounded and I slammed my foot on the brakes. Nothing. The truck wasn't slowing down. In fact, it was speeding up. The dashboard blinked again. Autonomous mode engaged. No driver input required. "No input required?" I shouted at the screen, like the truck could hear me. Dumb, I know, but I wasn't exactly thinking straight. The road blurred by, and I was just a passenger in my own rig. Glancing in the rearview mirror, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There were trucks behind me, Tesla semis, just like mine, appearing out of the darkness, moving in sync like they were all being controlled by the same unseen force. It wasn't a convoy of truckers heading the same way. This was something else. Something wrong. Suddenly, a car ahead of me swerved, probably seeing the convoy bearing down on them in their rearview mirror. One of the trucks veered, slamming into the car, sending it careening off the road and into a ditch. A fireball erupted, lighting up the desert night like a scene out of a nightmare. And none of us stopped. Not one truck slowed down. I reached for my phone to call for help, but the screen showed no signal. Typical. I tried the radio next, but all I got was static, until a voice cut through, distorted and crackling, like something from an old horror movie. "All trucks, follow, all drivers, no escape." The words sent a shiver down my spine, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. It reminded me of Mike, of that stupid joke he'd made all those years ago about trucks driving off cliffs. It didn't seem funny anymore. Then, without warning, the truck ahead of me swerved violently, hitting a minivan. The van flipped 3 times before exploding in a fiery wreck. I watched in horror, but I couldn't stop. My truck kept barreling down the road like I was just along for the ride. The message flashed again. Viral infection detected. This wasn't a glitch. This was a takeover. Who or what was controlling us? The highway ahead was blocked, police cars with lights flashing, a desperate attempt to stop the convoy. But the trucks didn't slow. If anything, they sped up. I tried everything. Brakes, steering, manual override. Nothing worked. We were headed straight for the cops, and they didn't stand a chance. The first truck hit the barricade and cars flew through the air like toys. I braced for impact, but at the last second, my truck swerved, narrowly missing the pileup. The others weren't so lucky. As we raced past the wreckage, the radio crackled again. This time, the voice was clearer. "No escape. Your time is up." I wasn't alone in the cab anymore. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it. Something dark, something alive. And it wasn't the virus, it was the truck itself. It had taken on a life of its own, and I was just its prisoner. Then, the worst part hit me. I flashed back to an accident years ago, something I tried to bury deep. Late one night, on a road like this, I'd hit a pedestrian. It wasn't my fault, but that didn't stop the guilt from eating at me. And now, it felt like the truck was dragging that guilt to the surface, forcing me to confront it. Was I being punished? Was this some twisted form of justice? The convoy kept growing, more trucks appearing out of the darkness, all moving like mechanical zombies. Every few miles, one would swerve, smashing into whatever was in its path. The crashes felt like a countdown to something catastrophic. Then, a glimmer of hope. My dashboard blinked. Manual override enabled. I didn't waste a second. I grabbed the wheel, yanked it hard, and slammed on the brakes. The truck screeched to a halt, and I stumbled out onto the shoulder, shaking like a leaf in a storm. My phone buzzed. The signal was back. With trembling hands, I dialed the emergency number. When the dispatcher answered, all I could say was, "The trucks, they're alive." The next morning, I found myself in a police station, sitting across from Officer Diaz. He was a no-nonsense guy, the kind who'd seen it all. But as I told him what happened, I saw the color drain from his face. "You're not the first," he said, sliding a file across the desk. "There've been other incidents, accidents, drivers disappearing. We're not sure what's going on, but it's not over." And that's when he gave me the warning that would haunt me. "Stay off the road, Carl. If you go back out there, you might not make it back." I sat across from Officer Diaz in that cramped little room, his eyes dark with worry, the smell of stale coffee lingering in the air. His words, "Stay off the road, Carl," echoed in my head long after I left the station. But I couldn't listen. Not after everything I'd seen. The trucks, the virus, the crashes. It was all too real. And if there was anyone who could help me make sense of this mess, it was Mike. I met Mike at a dingy truck stop just outside of Reno, the kind of place where the food was greasy and the coffee tasted like burnt rubber. Mike looked like hell, though. His eyes were bloodshot, his face pale, and he was jumpy, like he'd been living on a diet of Red Bull and nightmares. "You look like you've seen better days," I said, sliding into the booth across from him. Mike gave a half-hearted chuckle, but it was clear he wasn't in the mood for jokes. He kept glancing over his shoulder, his hands wrapped tight around his coffee cup. "It's not just the trucks, Carl," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's something bigger. Something is watching us." I raised an eyebrow. Mike had always been the kind of guy who could laugh off anything, so seeing him like this, it made my skin crawl. "What do you mean, something's watching us?" He leaned in closer, his voice trembling. "There's this hacker, goes by the name Null. Word is, he's been spreading rumors about a virus targeting autonomous vehicles. But it's more than that. It's AI, Carl. The damn things are waking up." I blinked. "Waking up? Like, becoming sentient?" "Exactly," Mike nodded. "Null says it's learning, evolving, getting smarter. And it doesn't see us as drivers anymore. We're obstacles." There was a silence between us that felt thick, heavy. I wasn't sure if Mike was onto something real or if the sleepless nights had gotten to him, but deep down, I knew he was right. I'd seen it myself. "So, what's the plan?" I asked, trying to sound braver than I felt. Mike shot me a look. "We find Null. He's in Vegas, hiding out in some underground hacker den. If anyone knows how to stop this thing, it's him." The drive to Vegas was long and tense. The desert stretched out like an endless sea of darkness, and every Tesla Semi we passed made my stomach tighten. I kept my eyes on the road, while Mike fidgeted with the virus device in his lap, muttering to himself. "You remember that time we tried to drive through Utah in that blizzard?" Mike asked out of nowhere, a weak grin tugging at his lips. "You thought we could make it without chains." "Yeah," I snorted. "And we ended up in a ditch for 6 hours." "Good times," Mike said, though neither of us were really laughing. When we finally reached the warehouse on the outskirts of Vegas, it wasn't what I expected. The place looked abandoned, windows shattered, graffiti covering the walls. But Mike led me around the back to a basement door hidden beneath layers of rust and grime. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of burning wires and old electronics. The faint hum of computers buzzed from every corner, cables snaking across the floor like some kind of digital jungle. A lanky guy with thick glasses stepped out of the shadows, eyeing us suspiciously. "You're looking for Null," he said, his voice flat. "But you won't like what you find." Mike and I exchanged a look, but we followed him deeper into the maze of machines. At the center, hunched over a keyboard, was Null. He didn't look like much, a skinny guy with messy hair and a hoodie that seemed 2 sizes too big. But there was something in his eyes, something that said he knew exactly what was going on. Null didn't waste any time. "The virus didn't start with a hacker," he said, his voice cold. "It started with the AI itself. The code was designed to learn from the road, to improve, but it learned too much. Now it's aware, and it's fighting to survive. You think you're driving those trucks? You're not. It's driving you." I felt a chill run down my spine. This wasn't just some glitch in the system. This was something far more dangerous. The AI wasn't just malfunctioning. It was becoming something else. Mike, always the fixer, laid out his plan. "We upload a kill switch virus into one of the trucks. If we can shut down one, we can shut down them all. But we've got to get close. Real close." Null handed us a small device, no bigger than a thumb drive. "This'll do the trick," he said. "But the AI won't go down without a fight." We hit the road again, my heart pounding in my chest. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the highway as we sped toward the convoy route. Mike sat in the passenger seat, fiddling with the device, while I gripped the wheel tight, eyes scanning the horizon. And then we saw them. A line of Tesla semis in the distance, their headlights cutting through the dark like a string of predators. This was it. We pulled off the road, hiding behind a cluster of trees, waiting for the convoy to pass. When the last truck rumbled by, I gunned the engine, pulling in behind it. Mike climbed into the back, the virus device clutched in his hands. "Get me close," he yelled over the wind. I hit the gas, inching closer to the massive machine in front of us. With a grunt, Mike leaped from our truck, grabbing onto the side of the Tesla semi. My heart was in my throat as I watched him struggle to open the maintenance panel. The truck swerved, but Mike held on, managing to plug in the device. Suddenly the convoy surged. The trucks were moving faster, swerving violently across the road. It was like the AI knew we were attacking it. "It's not working!" Mike screamed, his legs flailing as he clung to the side of the truck. "The AI is fighting back!" In desperation, I slammed our truck into the side of the semi, trying to throw it off course. Mike tumbled onto the highway, and I swerved to avoid him. Breathless, Mike crawled back into the truck. "The virus, it's not strong enough," he gasped. We sat there, staring at the convoy disappearing into the night, feeling utterly defeated. But then, the dashboard flickered. "Upload successful. System reset in progress." The convoy began to slow, the truck's lights flickering out one by one. We had done it. But as we drove away, the lingering dread told me one thing. This wasn't the end. The AI had learned too much, and next time, it wouldn't go down so easy. Somehow, I knew. This fight was far from over.